I used to think being sensitive was a flaw, something I had to correct, smooth over, silence. Especially around her. Lindsay, my wife of 6 years, partner of almost a decade. She used to say it as if she was being helpful, like she was offering a diagnosis and a cure in one breath. You're just a little too sensitive, babe. Sometimes it came with a smile. Sometimes it was a sigh. And sometimes, especially near the end, it came with a smirk that barely hid the contempt. But I didn't fight her on it. Not at first. I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was too thin-skinned. I'd come from a quieter family, one that talked things out instead of talking over each other. Her family, though, they were loud, opinionated, realists, as they called themselves. Her mother, Karen, could find something to criticize in a sunrise. Her dad, Roy, was a retired military man who believed every problem could be solved with a tighter routine and a firmer handshake. And Lindsay, well, she adapted to them. Or maybe she was always like them, and I was too in love to notice. The thing is, I didn't start recording her to get revenge. That's important. It wasn't some grand plot. It started small. Almost pathetic, if I'm being honest. I recorded her voice one night after she left the room, just to play it back to myself. She had snapped at me for asking if she wanted tea. God, why do you always hover? She'd snapped. And I remember sitting there afterward thinking, was that really that bad? Was I overreacting? Maybe I was being too sensitive again. So I hit record the next time. Then the next. And I played them back in those quiet hours of the night when she was asleep and I was trying to understand who we were becoming. What I was becoming. The recordings stacked up. 30-second clips. 5-minute rants. One where she called me an emotional parasite for asking why she hadn't come home until 2 a.m. Another where she joked on the phone to a friend that I was like a houseplant with feelings. I didn't confront her. I didn't even tell anyone. I just kept collecting the pieces, like a man assembling a jigsaw puzzle of his own unraveling. Her birthday was in early September. The plan was to host dinner at our place, just her parents, her younger sister, and her fiancé, and a couple of her friends. She didn't want my folks there. Said it would be too crowded. That hurt, but I didn't push back. That night, she wore a navy dress with gold earrings I'd given her last Christmas. She looked beautiful, in that untouchable way she had when she was around people who made her feel superior. I cooked the meal. Ribeye, asparagus with garlic butter, twice-baked potatoes. I even made that ridiculous 3-layer cake her mom liked. No one said thank you. Not really. Lindsay kept refilling her wine glass. Her tone sharpened as the night wore on. It always did. Her jabs were quieter around her friends, but got bolder around her family, like they gave her permission to lean into the worst parts of herself. About halfway through dinner, Roy brought up a local election, and I said something. Honestly, I don't even remember what, but Lindsay rolled her eyes and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Here he goes again with his bleeding heart takes. You just can't help being sensitive, can you, babe?" They all laughed. It wasn't the kind of laughter that invited you in. It was the kind that made you feel like you'd left the room without realizing it. I felt myself shrink. Something tightened in my throat. And I looked at her, really looked. The way she didn't glance at me, didn't offer even a performative pat on the knee, just kept eating like I was wallpaper. I didn't plan what happened next. That's the truth. But my phone was in my pocket. And I knew exactly which file I had queued up. One from 2 nights earlier, when she came home at 1:48 a.m. and berated me for being needy because I'd asked if she was okay. So I stood up. At first, no one noticed. I walked over to the speaker system. We had one of those Bluetooth setups Lindsay insisted on for entertaining. I connected my phone. Then I hit play. Her voice filled the room. Not the version they knew. Not the polished, sarcastic, composed Lindsay they were used to seeing at holidays and in social media captions. This was raw, sharp, a voice thick with wine and venom. "God, you are so exhausting," she snapped in the recording. "You sit here stewing like a teenager because I went out for drinks. You know what? You don't deserve to know where I am all the time. You don't get to track me like some pathetic little hall monitor." A fork clinked against a plate. Karen blinked, wine glass halfway to her lips. The audio kept playing. "Maybe if you had a life of your own, you wouldn't be so obsessed with mine. Jesus, you're like emotional quicksand, always dragging me down with your insecurities." Lindsay's voice in real life was the first to break the silence. "What the hell are you doing?" she asked, her face blanching. I didn't answer. I just let the recording run. The words filled the room like smoke. Sensitive, I said finally, when the clip ended. That's what you always called it. I just wanted everyone to hear what that word really meant coming from you. Her dad stood up. Turn that off. Now. Lindsay looked like she'd been slapped, but not physically. More like someone had suddenly pulled a mirror in front of her and left her nowhere to hide. She started to speak, but I raised a hand. Don't worry, I said. I'm done talking. Just thought the truth deserved a little airtime. And then, before anyone could say another word, I walked out. I didn't go far that night, just enough to feel air that didn't belong to her. I sat in the car for a while, engine off, keys in my lap. I could still hear the silence that followed that recording playing in the dining room. Funny thing about silence, it's not empty. It's filled with everything people don't know how to say. I half expected someone to follow me out. Maybe Roy, to lecture me about boundaries. Maybe her sister, to try and patch things over. But no one came. And honestly, I was glad. I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity. The next morning, I woke up at my friend Michael's place. He and I hadn't talked in a while, but he didn't ask questions when I showed up. Just handed me a spare pillow and said, "She hurt you again, didn't she?" That was the first time I nodded without flinching. Later that day, Lindsay texted. Just 4 words. "You humiliated me." Why? No apology. No question about why I had those recordings or what she'd said. Just wounded pride and a quiet threat stitched into the question. I didn't reply. I started forwarding her the clips. 1 per day. Nothing malicious, just clarity. Just truth. I wanted her to sit with the words she'd spoken, maybe for the first time, without someone softening their landing. At first, there was silence. Then the denial started. You're taking things out of context. You don't know how women talk when they're frustrated. I was venting. You're weaponizing my vulnerability. That one hurt in a strange, ironic way. Vulnerability? Is that what she called what she did to me? By the 3rd day, her sister texted me. Said I was being performative, that I was making things worse. I ignored it. I'd spent years swallowing my discomfort for their convenience. They could choke on a few uncomfortable truths for once. A week after that dinner, Lindsay finally called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice tight and shaky. You blindsided me. My parents think I'm some kind of monster now. Do you even care how this makes me look? That told me everything I needed to know. Still, I listened to the full message twice. Not because I was considering responding, but because I was trying to remember the version of her I fell in love with. And I couldn't find it in her voice anymore. A few days later, Karen, her mother, asked to meet. Just coffee, she said. Neutral ground. I hesitated, but I went. Maybe part of me still wanted to be heard. Or understood. She was already seated when I arrived, pearl earrings and that stiff posture she wore like armor. I sat across from her, not expecting much. I raised her to be tough, she said after a long silence. But I didn't raise her to be cruel. I said nothing. I just sipped my coffee and let her continue. She's always had a sharp tongue. We all do, in this family. But I see now, that's not strength. Not if it cuts down the people closest to you. That surprised me. I didn't know if it was an apology or not, but it was the closest I'd ever get. I don't know what happens next, I finally said. But I can't keep pretending it didn't hurt just because everyone else thinks I should be tougher. Karen nodded slowly. I don't think anyone's pretending anymore. She paid for the coffee. I didn't stop her. 2 days later, Lindsay showed up at Michael's place. I saw her through the peephole. No makeup, hoodie, hands trembling slightly as she held her phone. I opened the door halfway. She didn't speak right away. Her eyes searched mine like they were trying to find something she'd lost. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she said. Do what? I asked. Make them see me like that. I didn't answer. She stepped back, like she was retreating into herself. I thought you'd protect me, even if you were hurting. That's what you've always done. And there it was, her truth. She hadn't expected me to leave, to speak, to expose. Because I'd spent so long swallowing my pain that it became part of our rhythm. My silence was her shield. My sensitivity her punching bag. Yeah, I said. That's what I always did. She nodded like she already knew. So what now? And I gave her the same answer I'd been giving myself every morning since that dinner. I don't know, but I'm not going back. Her eyes welled up, and for a moment, I saw the woman I used to love again. Or maybe I just wanted to see her. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't always come from hate. Sometimes it comes from comfort. From someone who believes you'll stay because you always have. I never meant to break you, she said, her voice cracking. I looked at her, really looked, and finally said, "You didn't. You just made me see I was already broken." She turned and walked away. No more words. No dramatics. Just the quiet ending of something that had been crumbling for years. And me? I closed the door. Not in anger. Not in triumph. Just peace. It's strange how grief doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it's subtle. A quiet fog. A sudden stillness in a room that used to hum with noise. The days after she walked away from Michael's porch weren't full of fireworks. No screaming. No begging. No final, sweeping gestures. Just silence. And in that silence, I found the shape of what I'd been living in. There's something I've learned about healing. It doesn't feel like strength, not at first. It feels like doubt, like guilt, like wondering if maybe you were the problem. Maybe you were too sensitive, too soft, too eager to please. But the thing is, being sensitive isn't a flaw. It's a kind of seeing, a way of noticing the cracks before they become craters, a way of feeling the cold in a room before anyone else realizes the heat's been turned off. That family dinner, that wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. I didn't play those recordings to hurt her. I played them to stop hurting me. A week after that night, I started therapy. Not couples therapy. Not, let's fix this therapy. Just me. Just trying to understand how I became the version of myself who thought enduring cruelty in silence was noble. The first session, I said, "I don't even know if I was abused." And my therapist replied, gently, "Let's not worry about the label yet. Let's talk about what you felt." So I did. I talked. I unspooled years of trying to make myself smaller to keep her comfortable. The nights I'd walk on eggshells. The way I'd apologize just to keep the peace. How I'd lie to my friends about how strong she was when I really meant sharp. And how I'd convinced myself that being cut was just part of being close to someone sharp. A month in, I realized something. I wasn't grieving the loss of our marriage. I was grieving the version of me that stayed. I found a new apartment. Nothing flashy. Just mine. Clean walls. Quiet mornings. I started cooking again. Not for anyone else, just for the joy of it. I bought fresh herbs and left them on the windowsill. No one complained about the smell of basil. No one rolled their eyes when I put on music while I cooked. Her family never reached out again. Not even Karen. And honestly, that was fine. Some silences are mercies in disguise. I started writing again, too. Not for work. Just reflections. Letters I'd never sent. Memories I needed to put somewhere outside of me. Here's one I wrote on a rainy Sunday morning. "Dear Lindsay, I used to think love meant enduring. That it meant compromise at the cost of self. I don't believe that anymore. Love should never be a test of how much pain someone can take. I'm not angry at you. I'm not bitter. I just don't want to live in a world where my softness is mistaken for weakness. I hope you find peace. I hope I do too." I never sent it. I didn't need to. The last time I saw her was in the grocery store about 3 months after the dinner. I was in the produce aisle, holding a bag of lemons. She turned the corner with a cart and froze when she saw me. There was a flicker of something in her face, surprise, maybe, or recognition, like she was seeing me for the first time without the version of me she used to edit in her head. "You look good," she said, cautious. "Thanks," I replied. "You too." And we stood there for a beat too long, surrounded by people who had no idea what history had just collided between 2 shelves of tomatoes and avocados. She didn't apologize. I didn't expect her to, but she did say, "I've been thinking a lot. About that night. About what you played." I nodded. "So have I." She swallowed, like there was more she wanted to say. But she didn't. And maybe that was enough. She walked away. I let her. That was the last time we spoke. These days, I sleep better. I don't flinch when my phone buzzes. I laugh more freely. I've let myself cry without shame. I've started rebuilding, not from the rubble, but from the clarity. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did at that dinner, if I would do it again. And the answer is yes. Not to embarrass her, not to prove anything, but because I needed to say out loud, "This happened. This hurt. This matters." Being sensitive isn't weakness. It's survival. It's strength in a world that teaches men to mute themselves in the name of stoicism. I was never too sensitive. I was just finally listening to myself.